I'm Dr. Mark McDonald. I'm a child psychiatrist in Los Angeles, California. I'm here today because my patients are scared. I'm here today because the American people are scared. They're being told that staying at home, staying in their basements, putting on a hazmat suit and jumping in front of traffic as they pass by people on the street is going to keep them safe. That is not a strategy. It is a tragedy, and it is not going to keep them safe. My patients have worsened in their emotional condition without exception since March. Bedwetting, self-harm behavior, depression, anxiety, even suicide.
Expose. Based sa SWS, 85% sa mga Filipinos are worried. 85%. Worried na po. Paano hindi ka mag-worry? Yung kabuhayan natin ang nakataya. And this time, mga kababayan, nakakalungkot nga, yung isang restaurant na kilalang-kilala, made history, tumatak na sa isipan natin, parte na ng ating buhay, Shangri-La, nag-shutdown na. Not only Shangri-La, mayroon pang iba mamaya, isasabi ko po sa inyo kung ano, and that is, all products of coronavirus.
Today, the greatest risk of global catastrophe doesn't look like this. Instead, it looks like this. If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war. Not missiles, but microbes. Now, part of the reason for this is that we have invested a huge amount in nuclear deterrence. But we've actually invested very little in a system to stop an epidemic. We're not ready for the next epidemic. You can have a virus where people feel well enough while they're infectious that they get on a plane or they go to a market. The source of the virus could be a natural epidemic like Ebola, or it could be bioterrorism.
There will be a surprise outbreak. Given, as you heard from the introduction, that I have been around for a while and have had the opportunity and the privilege and the pleasure of serving in 5 administrations, I thought I would bring that perspective to the topic today, is the issue of pandemic preparedness. And if there's one message that I want to leave with you today, based on my experience, and you'll see that in a moment, is that there is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak. And I hope by the end of my relatively short presentation, you will understand why the history of the last 32 years that I've been the director of NIAID will tell the next administration that there's no doubt in anyone's mind that they will be faced with the challenges that their predecessors were faced with.
Dr. Judy Mikovits has been called one of the most accomplished scientists of her generation. Her 1991 doctoral thesis revolutionized the treatment of HIV/AIDS. At the height of her career, Dr. Mikovits published a blockbuster article in the journal Science. The controversial article sent shockwaves through the scientific community as it revealed that the common use of animal and human fetal tissues were unleashing devastating plagues of chronic diseases. For exposing their deadly secrets, the minions of Big Pharma waged war on Dr. Mikovits, destroying her good name, career, and personal life. Now, as the fate of nations hang in the balance, Dr. Michaelvitz is naming names of those behind the plague of corruption that places all human life in danger. So you made a discovery that conflicted with the agreed-upon narrative.
Correct.
And for that, they did everything in their powers to destroy your life.
Correct.
You were arrested? Do you believe that this virus was created in a laboratory?
I wouldn't use the word created, but you can't say naturally occurring if it was by way of the laboratory. So it's very clear this virus was manipulated, this family of viruses was manipulated and studied in a laboratory where the animals were taken into the laboratory, and this is what was released, whether deliberate or not. That cannot be naturally occurring. Somebody didn't go to a market, get a bat, the virus didn't jump directly to humans. That's not how it works. That's accelerated viral evolution. If it was a natural occurrence, it would take it up to 800 years to occur. This occurred from SARS-1 within a decade. That's not naturally occurring.
And do you have any ideas of where this occurred?
Oh yeah, I'm sure it occurred between the North Carolina laboratories, Fort Detrick, the U.S. Army Research Institute of Infectious Disease, and the Wuhan laboratory.
$3.7 million flowed from the National Institutes of Health here in the U.S. to the Wuhan lab in China, the same lab where many people have said that this coronavirus infection first originated. We also now know that NIAID, the department associated with the National Institutes of Health, of which Dr. Anthony Fauci is in control, had already been conducting experiments with the Wuhan lab in the past in regard to coronavirus. If Dr. Anthony Fauci cannot be honest with the public about his connection to this lab, then Fauci has to go.
In 1999, I was working in Fort Detrick in USAMRIID there, and my job was to teach Ebola how to infect human cells without killing them. Ebola couldn't infect human cells until we took it in the laboratories and taught them.
It's hard to ignore the death tolls. People have been dying. They are dying from this in quite alarming numbers. How do you decide to come forth when your gag order has been released to write a book called Plague of Corruption, Restoring Faith in the Promise of Science? And you are naming names.
Absolutely.
Apparently their attempt to silence you has failed. And I have to ask, how do you sit here with confidence to call out these great forces and not fear for your life as you leave this building?
Because if we don't stop this now, we can not only forget our republic and our freedom, but we can forget humanity because we'll be killed by this agenda.
So Anthony Fauci.
My name is Dr. Tony Fauci. I'm the director.
The man who is heading the pandemic task force was involved in a cover-up.
He directed the cover-up. And in fact, everybody else was paid off. And paid off big time. Millions of dollars in funding from Tony Fauci's organization, National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. These investigators that committed the fraud continue to this day to be paid big time by the NIAID.
And the whole world is listening to his advice for how to handle this current pandemic. How do we know that what he's saying is what we need to be learning?
What he's saying is absolute propaganda, and the same kind of propaganda that he's perpetrated to kill millions since 1984.
We know from this study quite clearly that there will be a delay in progression significantly greater than for individuals who do not take the drug.
Explain to our viewers what led you to this discovery and how the numbers never
province, ako ginang gipasegregate kay daghan naman kaitag istorya ng gawas ron, di ba? Kita gyud ta anak primero katong aksidente sa Carmen sa motor. Blunt trauma, naigo ang op, namatay pag abot unya giswab positive, uy COVID naman. Naigi atakis kasing-kasing pag abot positive COVID. Mana sa province niingon ako, isegregate lagi na. Hay man ini ang namatay gyud nga COVID gyud ba nga way lain, way comorbidity, walay lain nga ma-attribute nimo og hay man ani nga incidental na lang kay kanhi karon bisag DOA na iswab man gihapon. Kani lagi karong naay gidunggab sa dito nga barangay nga Cebu City. Gidunggab. Namatay. Pag-abot sa ospital, gi-COVID man. Di-COVID, gi-cremate. Nagproblema na rong pamilya. Saan pa man nila pagkiha sa nagdunggab? Nga ang cause of death, COVID, unya kay gi-cremate man, wa na may ma-autopsy nga lawas. No, you know, this is getting ridiculous, but tinuod na. That is a true case. There's a very well-known family sa Guadalupe. Di lang ko mong hisgot kinsa, but this is an actual case. Akong igsuon mismo na hibaw ani kinaa siya nagpuyo sa Guadalupe Heights. Namatay. Renal failure. Kay dialysis patient tanan namatay sa balay. Pag-abot sa ospital, COVID. Ni protesta ng pamilya nganong gi-COVID man to. Wa na nakapa-dialysis. Kay nanas balay. Kay murag daghang dialysis centers muna nira. Renal failure, COVID. There has to be some questions that need to be asked. Because I believe na ang may mga COVID packages good. Ang PhilHealth mo cover man kani ato nahadlok ta. La, mo ato mo ospital dako kay mo bayranan pero kung PhilHealth no, awa mo bayran uy. Mo na do na tay usa ka empleyado dire, o dili empleyado, consultant. I will not mention who, but you can always confirm. Kung naay mga cynics diha out there. Na giubo to gilantan. Naon sa to siya? Na ospital. Lain yang fili, lain yang paminaw na ospital. Giubog. Giswab. Gibutang COVID probable. Wa pay resulta sa swab, gawas naman siya. Pilay na bayran, hadlok, ingon ko sus, napo ka kaadlaw sa ospital. Pila man taw imo na bayran? 1,800. Usa ka 1,800 ko. Nga naman, nga COVID magka. Di cover mas PhilHealth. Ang 140,000 covered sa PhilHealth. Kay probable raman 140. Kung COVID positive 200. O critical 700. So, nigawas ra ba ang resulta pagkahuman? Negative. So, nindot na nga term da probable. Probably yes and probably no. Probably positive and probably negative. Kini siya ni aman ron. I can give you the name if anyone wants to investigate. Ni aman gyud. Negative ang result. Correct? Ang swab?
Yes.
Pero, bayad ng PhilHealth of 140,000. There are reports, musulti na ako, nga musugot na ng pamilya, maski dili COVID, i-COVID na lang ni kay covered man, way bayad. Kay PhilHealth man, at the rate that PhilHealth will be paying all of these claims, nga maski dili gyud tinuuray nga COVID, I wonder if ma-implement pa ba nato ang Universal Healthcare Law nga mas kinahanglan sa mga tao. Mas kinahanglan na itong pundo, ana. But, wow. Dagko man kaayo ang COVID, kaning mga PhilHealth packages. So, of course, that will add on. Ibutang na to na COVID. Kaya manugot naman ang pamilya. Pero, let's go back. Kaning deaths. Sa 221 na deaths, diri sa province ato ning gi-segregate. 119 ana lain nga cause, incidental na lang kay ipang swab man lagi. Either cardiovascular, hypertension, renal failure, kidney disease, lain-lain ang causes ani. Ang 119, incidental na lang nga COVID positive. Ang COVID gyud 50. Ang wa pay diagnosis up to now 52. Okay? So, sa 221, 53.8% ana dili COVID. Pero listed na as COVID death. 23.5% at 52, way klaro pang diagnosis. Dugay kay sila mohatag namog diagnosis ron kay amo naman tuki-tukion. So, wa gyapon 52 wa pay cause of death. Ang COVID yun is 22.6% ra. We need to dissect data. Kinahanglan nato i-analyze. So, ay lang mo pangasuko diha. Kamong uban nga di mo musugot nga mangutana ta. Nay, uban mo ingon. Basta, wear a mask and shut up. Ay, una-una sad ta. Kay ako, di ang magugos gobyerno, nagtanaw ko. Naglisod na biya sa kwarta ang gobyerno ron. Ako, nagtanaw ko aning PhilHealth. Wow. Sa kaning mga packages nga ilang kinahanglan bayran, I do hope nga ma-implement nato ang universal healthcare. Because they have to pay so much to the hospitals. Kamo, I'm sure you all have your own stories. Kay daghan na kayo nang insulti nako nga bitaw kami na magudmi nga kuan. I-COVID na lang ni kay para covered sa PhilHealth. I just hope that we will all be very truthful and honest about things. Let's not have our own agenda, ani. Now, I want to take up the issue of the 7 officials nga dakpan sa Tigbakay. Kani sila. I want to express my own disappointment.
Pag-usapan natin po itong possible reason for the spike in COVID cases dito po sa ating bansa. Kasi di kayo nakalata, every day, more than 1,000, 1,500 plus nga ngayon, yung kahapon na bilang, mamayang hapon may bago na naman. Dumami ng dumami. Ngayon, mga kababayan, may nagpaabot sa atin ng message. This is just a confirmation of what's happening not only in this country but all throughout the world. And in fact, sa Texas, mga kababayan, ganun din kung paano nila dinodoktor ng mga doktor, hindi ko nilalahat ano po. For what reason, dinodoktor ng mga doktor ang bilang ng mga COVID cases sa buong mundo. All because of, may nag-message din sa atin, hindi lang pala hospital, pati purinarya, hindi ko po sa inyo. This should be the subject of investigation. Sabi natin noon pa, because the figures, mga kababayan, are fake all throughout the world. Fake. Just like the pandemic, mga kababayan, it is a fake. Pandemic nga po ang tawag. At pandemonic. Events that are coming. Ito po mismo nakikita po natin, we witness right now. You will understand kung bakit yung ating Pangulo biglang nag-freeze. You will understand kung anong mga organization. And most of this organization, we are so familiar with. Ang akala natin, tumutulong lang sila. These are civic organizations. Ayoko na ako ang mag-mention ng mga civic organizations na to kasi pati dito sa amin, yung isa nga na-invite ako, butit umalis ako eh. Many times, nag-attend na rin ako ng mga meetings, kaya lang, wag na. Na-discovery ko kasi, mga kababayan, kung ano ang nasa likod. Alam ba ninyo na most government officials, high-ranking officials, mga members po ng kung ano-anong grupo na kasama doon, i-research ninyo, top generals of the armed forces, PNP, member po sila. Kahit nga yung mga politicians namin dito, kahit dito, member sila. Kaya ako po, hindi na ako nagtataka kung bakit tumigas yung kanilang utak. Tumigas po because they belong. Alex Fernandez may offer ng free scholarship ang mga satanista sa Amerika, sir, para sa mga estudyante. Dito na tuluyang babagsak ang Amerika. Nakita ko, report ng CNN mismo, namaya, you'll not believe me, mga kababayan, kung sabihin ko po sa inyo na the very objective of the cabal is to destroy economy, collapse businesses muna, and destroy economy, and ultimately destroy nations. Kasi nga, kung may independent country, mahihirapan sila na itayo ang one world government. That is why they're collapsing businesses. Ang mga negosyo po kasi, sila yung big contributors sa revenues, the lifeblood ng gobyerno. Si Navarro ng DTI was alarmed. 26% ng mga negosyo nagsara na. Despite the statement that he was alarmed last 2 days ago, nang sinabi niya yun. May bold action silang ginagawa. Wala. Basta alarm lang.
Because you posted something last week that I reported on your tweet, and this is where you said that the CV fear, the fear-mongering by the deep state will go down in history as one of the biggest frauds to manipulate economies, suppress dissent, and push mandated medicine. Now, you were tweeting in response to President Trump's claim that Democrats were inflaming the situation, the crisis, for political reasons. How did you come to the conclusion that what we're experiencing now is one of the biggest frauds in history?
Yeah, so if you look at that tweet, if you can bring it up again, if I can ask you to do that, if you look at that, when you look at this, the tweet is really addressing three things. You have people using fear to manipulate economies, suppress dissent, which is what the hierarchical system, the upper caste used to do. Shut up, fall in line, shut the hell up, right? And push mandated medicine because, look, the medical system we're moving towards is a top-down system, totally controlled by big pharma, big ag, and big vaccine manufacturers. And that's what I was putting out. So it's a very potent tweet because if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals that were put into, signed off by the United Nations and all their countries in 2015, it's called SDG, 2015, SDG 3, which was signed in 2015. Sustainable Development Goals. What it says is,
I hate this word sustainable now because everything has to be sustainable. It's a nice word, but because it has such control connotations.
Subsequently, in an Immunization 2030 document as an addendum to that, they say the way we get to utopia, these 17 goals, is we must immunize everyone on the planet. E.g., vaccinate everyone, okay? It's quite extraordinary.
That doesn't surprise me, honestly. It doesn't surprise me. So where do you think is going to happen with this vaccine? Do you think they're going to roll it out? Do you think they're going to mandate it like they just passed that law in Denmark?
Yeah, so on Thursday of last week, by the way, Denmark is considered by the UN, per their Sustainable Development Goals, as one of the, as a country that epitomizes, next to Sweden, the hallmark of those goals. And on Thursdays, Denmark said that they can forcibly go into people's homes and vaccinate people with police, which means military. So, look, when you're developing things these fast, you don't know the side effect of these things. And what we're saying is, we don't care about the side effects. We need to get this vaccine out. So it's creating some very important precedents that Americans need to be concerned about. First, what's going to happen next year, okay? Well, they're creating a condition basically saying, for medical fascism, saying, well, Gary, look what happened last year. You don't want to crash the economy, do you? We're going to have to vaccinate you. And forget the fact that we actually look at the immune system, that the immune system, the people who get harmed, it's not the virus that harms them. This is something that's fundamental, which I've been trying to harp on. Fauci, he's not talking about this. So we have an ignorant set of educated elites, and they're taking advantage of the American people because what they're saying is there's this boogeyman called the virus, okay? And you need the vaccine to help you stop that, okay? Boogeyman, savior. Boogeyman, savior. Savior's Bill Gates, right? Clinton Global Initiative, etc. Big Pharma. And that's basically what this is, because if you actually understood the immune system, it's laughable. The reality is the immune system has evolved over billions of years. We grew up in bacteria and viruses. We're supposed to play out in dirt. That's how the immune system gets turned on. So what pharma companies have moved to is vaccines. The 1986 the vaccine court was created. John Kennedy implemented the National Vaccination Act in 1962 under a fake science or an outdated science of the understanding of the immune system. That led to many injuries that took place between 1962 to 1986. In a response to those injuries, another Kennedy, Ted Kennedy, led the creation of the National Vaccine Injury Program, which led to the creation of the vaccine courts, not in the judicial department, but under Health and Human Services, which basically allowed indemnification of vaccine manufacturers so you couldn't sue them, and the maximum liability for death was $250,000, okay? And so we're at a situation now that for pharma companies, vaccines are pure profit, no liability, no risk, they can't get sued, okay? So that's what I meant by mandated medicine, because as someone who's been involved in this field for many years, when I came into looking at the one-size-fits-all vaccine program, there were other activists in this field, and frankly, many of them were controlled opposition. People like Bobby Kennedy was playing a good game saying he's against vaccines. Meanwhile, he endorses Hillary Clinton, who is vaccine queen, okay, against these vaccine mandates. So that's what that tweet is about. It's really, it's a pretty cool tweet when I look back. You know, it was a convergence of many things about what my life has been about politics, and essentially the deep state of a few set of people, from the Gateses, the Gates Foundation, to the Zuckerbergs, to Hillary Clinton, you know, congealed with the UN and the deep state elites, believing that they're going to advance, they're going to fear monger on coronavirus because of the ignorance of the medical profession. Most MDs do not know what the immune system is. They frankly have no idea. They don't even study nutrition. And based on that ignorance, they were going to scare the hell out of people with the coronavirus, you know, the quote unquote invisible enemy. I think I just put a tweet out. What an amazing way, right? You scare people with the virus, no one even can see it, right? And then you use that fear to essentially say, we need to do this for the quote unquote common good. That's what we're seeing go on. And it's an amazing recipe for fascism.
It's terrifying to consider. And what also is terrifying to consider is there's speculation, considerable speculation, that the virus is actually a manufactured bioweapon. Now, the State Department, among others, are pushing back against that narrative, simply calling it Chinese and Russian disinformation. So let me ask you this. What are the origins of this theory, and is there any truth to it?
Yeah, so the scientific, so let me go to the scientific origin, and then some of the stuff, you know, one of my researchers, and I went through a bunch of documents on this. Where it comes from. So now, separate from that, there have been reports that the Wuhan virus was very different. The coronavirus in Wuhan was a different strain than the one that was in Iran versus the one that was in Italy. And there's reports that I've read, you know, it's hard to verify a lot of this, that all of those different viruses go back to one common branch, which actually goes back to Fort Detrick, okay, in the United States and North Carolina. And there's other, you know, again, these are suppositions that the U.S. military or deep state sent people over to Wuhan, and that's how it got given in China. This is one theory. And the reason this comes up is because if you look at the first 41 cases, first of all, they haven't been able to find case 0, okay? But of the 41 cases, approximately 13 of these people, they're totally disconnected to these people, okay? So the thesis is that this came from somewhere else into Wuhan. Now, you know, whether it came in or not, my view is that if you believe in the concept of a set of people who don't care about the U.S. national interests or the Chinese national interests or the Indian national interests or Italian, they're more care for their own global interests. And, you know, nowadays, it would not, given, you know, the level of collusion that we've seen that takes place on so many levels, that, you know, you could view a scenario where it got created by the deep state and got put out there really to suppress dissent. Let me tell you what was going on at this time. Hong Kong was blowing up. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right. And what people do not know is 6 months before the coronavirus, there were massive anti-pollution protests by Chinese citizens in Wuhan, in the same city where this came from. And remember, you don't protest in China without risking your life. It's not like they have the First Amendment there. So large numbers of people are taking to the street and protesting, tens of thousands. because the Chinese government was going to build one of the largest incinerator plants there, which was going to just spew out pollution. By the way, the Paris Accords allows China to pollute, double their pollution. And the people in China, the everyday people, really care about their health, and there have been pollution protests since 2007, anti-pollution protests. But Wuhan was extremely growing, and then you don't hear any news about it. And then also remember, in the United States, the anti-vaccine movement was growing, okay? So, there's a scenario that becomes, to me, very interesting. You have Trump in the United States could not be taken down from Russian collusion. Trump could not be taken down from impeachment, right? And how extraordinary is it that this thing comes out, the timeless of it. You see Hong Kong completely disappear, serves the globalists, because they don't have to do, because remember, any protest creates uncertainty for globalism, right? You see Wuhan go away, and then you see now an argument is saying, of course we should vaccinate everyone, right? Against the anti-vaccine movement. So that's why I put that out.
Wow.
And when you're a student of politics and a student of medicine, you start seeing these connections, and you also recognize that the academic elite in this country is basically practices the oldest profession. No one in the academic elite is saying anything. Fortunately, I don't owe anything to academia. I made my own money by myself. I have the training to call out a guy like a Fauci, to call this out, because I understand the science, and most people in the field of immune systems don't really understand the science of immune systems. If you ask a typical doctor, if you ask them, well, what is a virus and how does the immune system work? They actually think that the virus is some big boogeyman, it's got big claws like alligators, and it goes into your body and starts eating your tissues, right? Like the Ebola thing, and you spew blood, and the vaccine blocks that, okay? This was so Fauci, he's a veteran of this. This ain't his first rodeo. He learned how to create bogus science, to promote bogus science, to create the fear of HIV causes AIDS. Billions of dollars were spent on this. A lot of people died because people used drugs like AZT. I had a very good friend of mine who died from it. And, people didn't learn HIV is frankly a harmless virus. Okay? The people who were dying from it were, again, immunocompromised. Gays at that time, were having 1,500 partners. We're doing meth, amphetamines, all sorts of drugs. They were destroying their immune system. You had IV drug users who were destroying their immune system, and you had people getting blood transfusions, not because of the virus in the blood, but because they would get immunosuppressive drugs. The simple point here from a scientific standpoint is when you lower and you destroy the immune system. So Fauci doesn't want to talk about that. Everything is about the boogeyman of viruses, okay? It is the biggest fraud that's taking place. Fauci knows what he's doing. He's been doing this. He is the face of pharma and vaccines, and he sees his opportunity to become, the hero in all of this.
Now,
that's what's going on.
Taking a step back here and looking at all the information you've just presented to me, the way I'm taking it in, and I'm comparing it to the information I've been ingesting over the past several weeks, the one big narrative that I've seen that's been presented is that, well, more people die from the flu. But there's this massive, terrifying visual of people being intubated and people eating bats and all this horrific
drama.
Visual propaganda. And now states are in lockdown mode. National Guard has been deployed. State guards have been deployed. Tents are being set up in cities and in Walmart parking lots and hospital parking lots. And you're having this spirit of fear descend on this country and the world at large. But compare this, why don't we do the same thing for the flu?
Well, it's a good question, because people weren't adopting the flu vaccine as much as they thought, okay? And furthermore, the flu vaccine is very, very ineffective if you actually read the papers. So you have to understand, pharma and media work very closely together.
And so many of us around the world think that, sustainable development, it just sounds so great. Isn't it about recycling and creative reuse and creating energy and food resources for everyone? And the answer is no. Globalization is the stepping stone to globalization, and globalization is the standardization of all systems. So that includes water, law enforcement, education, energy, all systems have to be brought into harmony in order to control them all. Because when systems don't meet, when they're out of balance or not in sync with one another, they can't be controlled centrally. And the goal of Agenda 21 is one world government and total control from a central unit. Across the world, understand that our individuality is at stake here. Our most important private property is our body. And of course, surveillance is a vital part. Surveillance, domestic surveillance and control is a vital part of this plan. It is a totalitarian plan. But, just like any other extreme plan for the world are doing this. It's just that the mainstream media is owned by 5 major corporations, and you're not going to get this information from the mainstream press. So you need to be your own press. You need to educate yourself. You need to get out there and educate your neighbors, your community, your real community. You need to help your children.